public hearing is now called to order at 3 minutes past 6 on Tuesday, February 23rd of 2021. This hearing is being held as required by the provisions of Chapter 131, Section 40 of the General Laws of the Commonwealth, an act relative to the protection of the wetlands as most recently amended. Notice of the time and place of this hearing was published in the Advocate on February 18th of this year. It was also posted in the town clerk's office. Pardon me. Persons wishing to be heard will be called in the following order. And let me close that document. We have another commission member present, and that's good. So, first order of business, minutes for approval for the February 9 meeting. I had a look at those minutes and didn't have any changes to suggest. I'm not sure if anybody else does.
No.
If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve as presented.
Motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that, but I think I did make one small correction.
Okay.
There was no mention of how big the 2x4 was, whether it was inches or feet. So I thought that should be made as feet, not inches.
I see. Small but important
So
detail.
I second that.
Oh.
Okay. So I have a motion to approve and a second with Everett's comments that he did make a. So Rick, would you be willing to remake the motion to approve minutes as amended?
Yes, I make a motion to approve minutes as amended.
I'll second.
Everett, is that a second from you?
Whoever.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You guys, okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Meeting mail, Agent Kelly, do we have any meeting mail? I know you did send a couple of things to us. I don't know if you want to talk about any of those.
Yeah, those are the ones, the only ones that we got. Let's see, we got a water quality certification for the Hamlin Street Bridge.
Right.
And that's a 8-page letter. And then we got a notice of exempt activities from Eversource about the Acushnet LNG facility.
Yep.
They're working there. And the last one we got was also from Eversource. And that was utility maintenance activities in the right of way. Structure replacement this time. So you guys, I scanned them all and you guys got them. So
Yep.
Nothing new.
Right, and I looked them all over. I mean, some of that stuff is stuff we see every year anyway. It's certainly things that Eversource does, even though structural replacement's a little new. You know, it falls in line with what happens with them every year anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, any concerns from you about any of those bits of mail?
For me, the
Yes.
Hamlin Street Bridge is worth reading. Just because it explains the project and stuff, you know. We're a little late for sending any comments or anything, but it's worth checking it out.
Yeah, it was interesting to read how, these certain structural changes, bridge versus culvert, that kind of thing, a culvert versus bridge.
Right.
As long as the water can get through, and the fact that it's going to be, what is it, 14 or 28 feet, the bridge is going to be a lot wider than it used to be, that's for sure.
Yeah.
A lot of work happening there.
They're going to have a fish biologist on site to make sure they don't screw up the fish passage. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so there's a lot here. If you have time to read it, it's worth looking at.
Yep. It's important both for safety purposes and for water flow purposes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any commission members with questions about any of the meeting mail?
No.
One of those things you might want to have a cup of coffee with you while you're reading it, because some of those are kind of lengthy. Okay, on to old business then. We have a notice of intent, PJ Keating Company, 72 South Main Street. File number is SE001-0558. A notice of intent was filed by PJ Keating Company for property located at 72 South Main Street, map 15, lots 15 through 18. The applicant proposes to grade the eastern slopes of the existing silt piles located at the rear of the PJ Keating Quarry property. Applicant is represented by Douglas Vigneault of PJ Keating Company. Plan name is Site Plan of Land at 72 South Main Street in Acushnet, Mass, dated December 21 of 2020, and this is continued from 2 meetings prior. Mr. Vigneault, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission this evening. Not a lot has progressed since the last meeting that we had, only because of weather, as you can well imagine. We have been in contact with Mike Toohill from your consulting firm, Conoco, and we're of a mutual agreement that we would like to request an additional 4-week continuance on the hearing so that we have an opportunity to actually get out there and do some of the examination of the delineation work, et cetera, as we discussed in the previous hearing. So really all we're asking tonight, commissioners, is that we be allowed to continue the hearing for an additional 4 weeks, and hopefully we'll get out there with the representatives that have been identified in the meeting minutes as Chuck Karen, myself, Mike Toohill, and Marilee Kelly. So that is a request for a continuance, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, and we request that you grant that continuance. Sure.
And I can say I'm not surprised to hear you ask, because the weather has not exactly made it easy to do any kind of work. So I see my fellow commissioner, Mr. Filler, has his hand up. Everett, over to you.
I think we should grant them this continuance for another 4 weeks.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ryan. So we have a motion and a second. Further discussion, questions from anybody, agent, PJ
No.
Keating? Anybody?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Sorry that well, I guess in a lot of ways it's good that it's brief, and hopefully when we talk again in 4 weeks, that we will have made some progress with respect to delineating the wetlands, agreement to the wetlands, and so on and so forth, and have more to report. It is weather permitting, as you can well imagine. Mm-hmm. And again, we thank you, and we'll see you in 4 weeks.
Okay.
Okay. And now our commission's going to vote.
Thank you. I just want
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to wait to the second meeting of the month of March. And no further discussion. I want to go commission member by commission member for the vote. Mr. Filler, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Pimentel?
Yes.
Ms. Pelletier?
Yes.
Mr. Resendes?
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you all from PJ Keating and others involved for tuning in. And we won't be insulted if you leave the meeting.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
New business. We have an NOI for Alan Clapp Cushing Solar LLC / Cushing Lane, map 7, lot 25, We don't have a file number for this yet. But since this is going to be a short meeting, this might be a good opportunity to ask questions anyway. So I'm going to continue, knowing that we can't vote tonight. And property owner Raymond White, White's Farm Incorporated. So notice of intent was filed by Alan Clapp, Cushing Solar LLC, for property located on Cushing Lane, map 7, lot 26. The applicant proposes to construct a large-scale solar project, 2.0 megawatt, on a portion of the Cushing Lane field property within the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. The applicant is represented by Stephen Giosa of SciTech Incorporated. Plan name is Cushing Solar LLC, 2 megawatt AC in Acushnet, Massachusetts, dated January 11 of 2021. Mr. Giosa, I would like to ask you, do you want to address both projects at the same time, or do you want to keep these two separate?
I think it would be, I think it's appropriate if you want to open both hearings at the same time. We may be able to consolidate the discussion, especially one of the exhibits does depict both projects in relation to each other. So that, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, I'm gonna read the other one then. So the other new business, also NOI for Alan Clapp, Woodbridge Renewables LLC, 1052 Main Street. No file number yet. Property owner Nancy Brito Kitchen. A notice of intent was filed by Alan Clapp, Woodbridge Renewables LLC, for a property located on 1052 Main Street, map 7, lot 23. The applicant proposes to construct a large-scale solar project, a 1.0 megawatt, located at 1052 Main Street, within the 100-foot buffer zone of a bordering vegetated wetland. The applicant is again represented by Stephen Joseph of SciTech Incorporated. Plan name is Woodbridge Renewables LLC, 1 megawatt AC array in Acushnet, Mass, dated September 1 of 2020. So again, just to note, this one that's accessed from 1052 Main Street is dated September 1 of 2020. The other one accessed, at least on paper, from Cushing Lane is dated January 11 of 2021. Mr. Joseph, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Steve Giosa with SciTech. With me tonight is also Alan Clapp, representing the applicant in this case. If I may share my screen and we can look through a couple of exhibits that'll give the commission members in the audience an orientation on what we're speaking of this evening.
Acushnet Cable has to give those to you, and it looks like you have those permissions. Cool.
Yes. So the first exhibit I have here is an aerial photograph. And what we're depicting outlined in yellow are the two subject properties. For orientation, this is Cushing Lane running to the north of both sites and terminates approximately here at the last house at the east end of the south end of Cushing Lane, on the east side of Cushing Lane. And then we have Main Street here off on the far west end of the property. And the second application that you read is for this parcel here, which goes all the way out, fairly large piece, about just under 40 acres in size, and extends out to Main Street with illegal frontage occurs here. And you may recall last year we were in front of the commission and we did receive approval for a solar project on 1050 Main Street, which is in this field located close to Main Street here. So we were before you about maybe about close to a year ago now here for this site. This is the White's Farm area. So the White's Farm property, which covers about 28 acres, just under 28 acres of land at the south terminus of Cushing Lane. And you'll see a little cul-de-sac here that has not been constructed yet, but that was a subdivision that was approved through a definitive subdivision back in 2011 for the White's Farm property. And again, if we are able to move forward with this project with both planning and conservation approvals, the applicant would be building a portion of this cul-de-sac as part of the project. But again, technically it was approved under a separate application to planning. And we're working through some technical issues with the planning board on that particular issue. So the two projects, the first one, Red Inn, occupies about 8 to 8.5 acres of mostly the field area of the White's Farm property. And the Brito Kitchen lot, the 1052 Main Street piece, the project is situated here in this back corner. Again, if you recall, on the 1050 Main Street property, there was wetlands that extended behind this property here. There's essentially a band of wetlands that kind of runs through here on this, between the 1050 and the 1052 Main Street property. And so the project would be confined to this area. Go ahead.
Steve, quick question. Just for reference purposes, 1050 Main Street, is that Flying Cloud property?
I don't believe so. The Bolios own this property.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I don't think that's the same.
Visited behind Flying Cloud.
Yeah. And then this is obviously the mobile home park just to the north of both properties. So that gives you an overview of where we are located. So both projects will access Cushing Lane, basically in this location here. We'll provide access to 1052, and this same access point will provide access to the White's Farm property here. So we can start with the White's Farm piece, I believe. No, that's the wrong one. One more over. Let's see. I'm going to close the aerial. It'll make it easier for me to grab the other plan. Okay, so this is the White's Farm property. Orientation, Cushing Lane is here. So north is off to the left side of the drawing. Here is that cul-de-sac that was approved under the subdivision regulations back in 2011. And this is basically the open field that exists on the White's property. And what we did in our initial evaluation of the site, we did what we normally would do. We checked natural heritage. There are no natural heritage areas for this property. We had Chris Capone, who is a conservation agent in the town of Westport, come out, and he had done this delineation a few years ago, and then we had him come back out this past summer and redelineate the wetlands running along this edge, since he was familiar with it. So this lighter green represents the wetland resource area for this particular site. And the field exists here, which is where we're really focusing the solar development. So these represent the racks and the solar modules through here. We have a fenced in enclosure. So our main facility is bounded by what would be a chain link fence running along the perimeter and then back up. So that really constitutes the primary limit of work for the site. And then access, as I indicated, would come off Cushing Lane, travel in a westerly direction off the extension of Cushing Lane, and then provide access to the equipment pads, which would be located here on the far west side of the property, and here right at the north corner of the project. So 2 equipment pads, the rest of the project being the fenced in enclosure. Additional work beyond the fence line would be limited to a little bit of clearing to get the line of sight for solar power generation up to the erosion control barrier, which is this heavier dash line, which runs kind of in a north to south direction as I'm following it along the screen. And it'll follow the entire perimeter of the work area so that any activity occurring here will be basically protected from causing an erosion issue to the down gradient wetlands. The topography, we've done a field survey, generally slopes from west at the high point down east to the low point, which you might expect, migrating towards the wetland system in this area. You'll see we've kept a pretty good buffer. The 100-foot buffer zone line is here. So all of the modules, all of the racks and the solar panels are outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. So the work in the buffer zone is really limited to a little bit of clearing here and here, and the installation of the fence. And that's the extent, and a little bit of clearing here, I'm sorry. The darker vegetation represents the existing treed area that will be preserved. So there'll be no activity in that heavier color. And anything that's disturbed here will be grassed, loamed, and seeded. We do have a seed mix on the plan that we've used on numerous solar projects, including the 1050 Main Street project. From a grading standpoint, there really isn't a lot of activity occurring here. The slope is mild enough to accommodate the solar panels. So we're not having to do any type of earthwork through this area. It's really getting the vegetation that's there now cleaned out, reseeding the site, building the access drive, which we've kept on the west side away from the resource area. In this location, it provides us good access into the site and then back out to Cushing Lane. There is some, because of the way this road was designed, Romanelli Associates did the road design initially for planning, and it was approved with a culvert going across here, basically because they're mounding up the grades of the road here, and we're cutting off a little bit of pocket in this location where the natural topography was draining down and naturally came down in this direction. So we're intercepting that, putting a small pipe under the road to make sure we're not creating a puddling problem up gradient here, and then directing that runoff through a grass swale with check dams down to the buffer zone, and then eventually where it normally would go down into the wetland system. So essentially the project is a buffer zone project, very limited buffer zone project. When you look at the activity within the buffer zone, it really is just this lower portion of the site. That really explains, I think, this particular site. And when we look at the 1052 Main Street site, again, orientation in this case, this is again the far east end of that 1052 property near Cushing Lane. North in this case is to the top of the drawing, and Cushing Lane is off on the far east side or the right of the screen. That access I described in that cul-de-sac at the end of Cushing Lane is down here. So the White's property where the other project is located is right here. The access drive that's going to serve both sites comes in here and then turns. And this is that long drive that goes down along the west side of the White's Farm project. We'll then continue into this site, and it would provide access to two equipment pads, one here, kind of in the south central portion of the field, and then a second pad located here. And we've created a turnout point for emergency vehicles and also to provide access long-term to a couple of stormwater management systems that we've proposed for this particular site. So with the other project, same thing, we mapped out the wetlands. The wetlands are here on the far western edge. The wetland flags are depicted, and the lighter green represents the wetlands. That's buffered by any activity here by a no disturb zone, which is the darker green. Covers just about 50% of the buffer zone. Then because of the natural drainage pattern, what happens is the water, there's a break point about here on the property. This portion of the site drains in this direction towards the wetlands, and this portion of the site drains to this northeast corner here. So on the northeast corner, what we're proposing is to create a little bit of a berm. It's only about 3 feet high. That will allow any surface runoff from this field that's being created to be trapped here. We'll detain it, slow the water down, reduce the peak flow, and then slowly let the water continue down gradient the way it normally would go. And the same thing on the west side of the project. We're creating a berm about 2 to 3 feet high, so very shallow, working with the natural topography, so we're not doing a lot of grading, and allowing the water to collect right here at the low point in the middle, an overflow structure, and then the water will then filter through the 50-foot node disturbed area and then into the eventually where the water normally would go into the wetland system to the west. Just like the other project, there are very little grade changes needed. It's really limited to the berm here on the west side and the berming here on the east side. We have erosion control proposed all along the edge of the proposed activity. So we're protecting the down gradient properties to the east and to the north. And then the same thing on the west side, we do have erosion control proposed in that area, coming all the way down, and then providing that buffering until full stabilization occurs. So I think we have, isolated the site, kept the grading to a minimum, so very little disturbance other than the tree clearing that'll be needed. Just as the other project is fenced in, the permanent fencing would be here, isolating the project and providing security and safety to the system with a gated access over here. And then each of the drainage areas at the top, they've designed for the 100-year event. The overflow would be through an emergency spillway here and here if you ever had an event exceeding the 100-year event. Again, we've seen a lot of these designs. They're very conservative today. So we've not seen the emergency spillways used, but they're there for long-term protection, so you don't have an uncontrolled washout of the berm, and it's a good design feature. Other than that, the interconnection will occur with poles that are needed to satisfy the power company. So underground on site and then above ground at the interconnection, and then feeding into the grid in this location here. So that's a brief overview. I know we do not have DEP file numbers this evening at this point in time, so I know we'll be looking for a continuance, but be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I do have.
2 quick questions before I ask our agent to comment or question. At the site visit on Saturday, one of the things we had asked about, and we've asked this with other solar projects, is possibility of the lower edge of the fence, which, and I realize you have to have a 7-foot fence around there for code purposes, but the bottom of that fence being 6 inches off the ground to allow passage of smaller wildlife. Is that factored into your plans?
Yes, it's actually on the detail sheet, and we do have that on all the projects we do. We know that that's usually a concern of the commission, so it is on the detail sheet. It is part of the design for both sites.
So my other question is, just to clarify, will that cul-de-sac be created anyway?
Yeah, well, I guess that's a question for Mr. White. What happened is when he created this cul-de-sac, he actually created 3 individual lots in this area. If this project goes forward, one of the things we're going to do is propose an A&R plan and merge all the land so it becomes a single parcel. Then it's just going to be a question whether the planning board believes this cul-de-sac really needs to be built to support the solar project. I mean, obviously the applicant would love to eliminate the construction of the cul-de-sac. We don't think it serves a major purpose here. It doesn't help the project for access, but we'll have to defer to the planning board on that particular issue.
Merrill Lee, questions, comments from you?
Yeah, on the other plan, I'm curious about the stormwater berm there. Is there an actual pool or like a pond to catch the water, or does it just sit there?
No, what we have is the surface water will just shed down here, and then we have the grading at the edges bringing the water down in this direction, and it's graded to drive it down to this location. We have a 6-inch sump because our outfall is controlled by we've got a box shaped structure here with a baffle on the front of it. And we want the water to exit from below the surface, just in case there's some floating material. It doesn't clog up our exit point. So the solid metal baffle keeps any floating debris. If you got branches and leaves, they're not going to clog up the outlet. So at most there's a 6-inch sump at the bottom, but essentially it'll drain out over time and infiltrate into the ground to the extent that it can. We've looked at the soils. You've got hydrologic soil group C and D here. So you got really relatively tight soils, high silt content. So you're not getting a lot of recharge naturally in this area. But again, it's intended to work with the natural topography. So we've kept it at natural grade. So we're not intercepting groundwater, and then eventually it'll drain through, but it's a very tiny depression that'd be created here.
So the water will sit for a while before it drains away.
Yeah, it'll sit there and then eventually filter into the ground or evaporate, one or the other.
Is that something that the Board of Health will have a problem with because of mosquitoes?
Again, when I look at it in the context of the adjacent wetlands, I'm assuming that it's not a large enough area to constitute an impact on that. One thing we've done, if it is a concern, is sometimes we'll put some crushed stone right at the very base. And we could put an under drain with a filter fabric wrap, like a very tiny, you don't want to short circuit your drainage system. Sometimes we'll put a short piece of pipe in to the outlet structure just so it has a place to go. But I don't think that's really necessary given the small amount of area we're talking about in the large wetlands that are adjacent. They're really going to be your mosquito breeding area here, not here.
Well, I'm looking at the other corner.
Yeah, and again, we can do that. I think that's probably not a bad idea, just to add some crushed stone at the base and keep it more of a pervious base. Keeping in mind, we don't have your typical runoff coming here where you've got water running off of, say, a parking lot surface or a roadway where you may accumulate a lot of sediments flushing in here. This is going to be pretty clean surface runoff. So yeah, we could add some crushed stone here and get it so that that water does not sit on the surface, that it actually gets below the grade. And by putting in, a 6-inch bed of stone at this lower level here, I think that would accomplish what your concern has been raised to have us address.
Yeah. Yeah,
Not
okay.
a bad idea.
And one more question. What's a GOAB? I saw it on the plan, GOAB.
I may have to defer to Alan on that one. Where did you see that? I'd have to see where that was.
It's down along the edges somewhere. I forget where now.
Well, that's an interesting question. If I should be able to answer it, but it might have to do with the interconnection equipment, but I'm not sure.
Well, I should know this as well, Steve, but I know it's an acronym for some equipment for the interconnection that's up on the pole.
I see. It's right here. It's a piece of equipment on this utility pole. So there'll be a utility pole, and that is a part of the interconnection equipment.
Oh, I see. Okay, just wondering.
I don't know, but.
Mr. Clapp, I have a question for you. Will it be your company that's responsible for maintenance of any of the drainage or anything like that? Especially,
yes,
just in thinking about the pond here on the west side of the 1052 Main Street. Pond is the wrong word. The water retention area on 1052 Main Street.
Yes, so we retain ownership of these projects. We're the construction managers, so we oversee that entire process, and then we own and maintain them for the duration of the project. And so we have in-house operations and maintenance people. And I would say after everything's established and vegetated, we certainly make sure has occurred, as the Concom does as well. We're out there at least 2 or 3 times maintaining the vegetation and again, cleaning things out or repairing anything that gets eroded from any particular reason. So
thank you.
To answer your question, yes.
Anybody else from the commission with questions or comments for Mr. Clapp or Mr. Joseph?
Yes, I have a question.
Rick, over to you.
Yeah, Mr. Joseph, regarding the Cushing Lane property, what type of erosion control barrier are you proposing? What are you looking to use there?
We had specified, let's see, silt fencing, I believe, in this case.
Silt fencing, okay.
Yeah. Just because, again, it's kind of a broad surface area. We sometimes look at going with the straw wattles, but I think in this case, the silt fencing was, I think, a more appropriate option.
Okay.
And we do have a filter sock also with that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I have a question. Are you willing to put something into your seed mix there for the pollinators, like maybe clover or something that blooms?
Yeah, we do. Actually, we used to use a lot of clover, primarily clover, and it didn't grow. It didn't vegetate as well. So we changed that mix. So what we certainly can add, like I don't know what the right percentage is, if it's 10 or 15% or something like that to help do that. And as a normal practice, something, we really didn't emphasize on this is, but in the perimeter of the project, we'll specifically plant pollinator seed mix, but not under the modules because your normal pollinators will grow too tall and you'd be cutting off all the flowering aspects of it anyway, except for clover because it's so short. But in the perimeter, outside the fence and areas that we do cut, we do propose planting of a pollinator seed mix, and we do let that grow to help.
Great.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, I agree.
Happy bees.
Yes, happy bees.
No, we don't have enough of them, unfortunately.
No, we don't. Agreed.
Everett, Orion, or Heidi, anything for you? Questions?
Yeah, my only question was, I asked it on Saturday, was the foundation for these panels, and I was told it was going to be like a helical or like a screw-in foundation. Other than that, I just want to confirm that's what you guys are using.
Yep, that's correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. No, that's all I had.
Thanks for confirming. Everett or Heidi, any questions or comments?
No, happy about the bees.
I'm set.
Anybody else who's tuned into this with questions or comments for the engineering firm or for the property proponent? If not, I'll entertain a motion to continue to the next meeting.
Okay.
So moved.
Thank you, Everett. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Rick. Any further discussion? So going across my screen as I see you, Everett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Heidi?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
That's unanimous. So we expect you'll have your file numbers for the March meeting, and we'll see you then.
All right, very good. Thank you for your time tonight.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, good night.
Tonight,
Good night.
let's go faster the next time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is discussion of wetlands bylaw. And our chair of the subcommittee is not present. So I don't know if anybody else has questions or comments on this topic.
No.
Okay. Let's see. Agent updates. Merrill Lee, over to you.
Okay. There's not a lot that's going on that's new. There's a lot about stormwater going on in town. PJ Keating being one of them, and all these solar projects. We're looking at all the stormwater for them. Beyond that, I think everybody is, some of the projects have gotten started, some of the solar projects, but a lot of them are still waiting to get, I don't know what they're waiting for, Eversource, I guess. So and everything else is, you know, people are plugging along, getting their houses built or whatever, you know. So nothing unusual. I'm still working on the MVP grant, so the you'll all be invited to those planning sessions, but they're going to be on Friday. So, you know, hopefully you can make it. But that's about it for now, I think. Unless you guys have questions.
No, not at this point. No.
Rick, did you have a question?
No, I didn't. No, I was just saying I didn't have any questions.
Okay. Everett's got a question.
Well, I don't know if this is a question or a statement, but do you think that it might be time that the town put a moratorium on developing of new solar fields until some of the ones that are approved are already up and running? I mean, we have dozens of them that are approved.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, the law says it's as of right zoning, so if they want to, they can put in a solar field. All we can do is condition it.
Oh.
It's a good question.
Yeah, there's a lot of them now.
I mean, we've got so many we've gone and looked at that they're still look like they did when we went to look at them 2 and 3 years ago, like the golf course, the putting range.
Well, I've heard that the driving range and the N550 main have gotten their approval from Eversource, so they're going to start working pretty soon, I think. And then you know, there's everything else that we've done for the past couple of years, so there's a lot of them.
Yeah, it seems like some of the problems were grid issues, permitting issues, connectivity issues, those kinds of things that are, you know, beyond what project proponents do. It's utility negotiations.
Right.
Okay.
So that's about it for me, though.
Thank you, Marilee. Anybody else with business for the commission?
Any updates on hunting on conservation land, Marilee?
Nobody has said a word to me about it. So no matter how many times I ask, it just keeps getting fallen by the wayside. So it's possible we won't get a lot of response until it gets near hunting season again.
All right.
Don't be afraid to keep on pestering them.
I will.
Any other business for the commission?
Ryan, did you get an email about your class?
I did. Yep. And
good.
I'm going to do that tomorrow night. Thank you.
Good.
I appreciate it.
No problem. Okay, that's about it for
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Everett.
Yeah. Woohoo! Get over.
I really do hope that's the case. I know March 21st is going to be here, but we'll see what happens on that date. All right, in that case, seeing no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Heidi. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Everett. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We adjourned at 6:46 p.m. Thank you all, and
Have a good week. See you soon.
great rest of the week.
Yep. See you guys.
Have a good night.